All right, carbon dioxide emissions from electricity, slightly different than gasoline. And that when we're talking about electricity we generally measure in kilowatt hours. So kilowatts, right, kilowatts is the same as 1,000 watts. So think about watts being the same as like a meter, a liter, or a gram in terms of the units, which means if we go left 3 places, we get to kilowatts. So that's why 1 kilowatt is the same as, so 1 kilowatt is 1,000 watts. Hours is literally just hours, and how long are you doing something? Now, CO2 emissions comes in as 1.37 pounds of CO2 for every 1 kilowatt hour. So the key here is that we need to figure out how many kilowatt hours something is using before we can find out the carbon dioxide. So the first step is getting kilowatt hours. So let's jump right in. You use your toaster oven for 6 hours a month. How much CO2 is emitted from the use of the toaster oven? Let's just figure this out for 1 month, okay? I didn't put that in there, but let's just pretend. So if you're using the workbook here on page 173, we have ourselves, this is the list of wattages. So if you're just looking at like in general life, you can always find the number of watts something uses. Like a microwave, it'll tell you how many watts your microwave is. You probably can Google it for a lot of different items, but page 173, we have just kind of a basic average of things. So if we find toaster oven in the kitchen, it shows that a toaster oven uses 1,200, that is the watts of it. And now that depends on how many hours, right? So basically that's for like 1 hour of use would be 1,200 watts. Okay, so let's think through this. I don't need watts because remember the goal is we need to get this in pounds over kilowatt hours. That is the goal. So the first thing we need to do is change watts to kilowatts. And as I mentioned previously, we know that 1,000 watts is the same as 1 kilowatts. That's why I gave that to you on the last page. So watts cancels out, and now I have kilowatts, which is good. That's part of it. But the other part is hours. So now we think, how long do we use this toaster oven? Well, I'm using it for 6 hours. So we would say, okay, fine. So let's multiply this by 6 hours over 1. So that makes me have kilowatt hours. Good, there's my hours. So now that I have, actually, let me just erase this over here. Now that I have kilowatt hours, now I can use the 1.37 pounds of CO2 is 1 kilowatt hour. Because remember, the idea is how much CO2 is emitted. So we want to use that last 1.37 pounds to 1 kilowatt hour. So for every 1 kilowatt hour of electricity we use, we burn 1.37 pounds, or we release 1.37 pounds of CO2. So thinking through our like units going away. So kilowatts cancels out with kilowatts, hours cancels out with hours, and we are just left in pounds, which is what we want, right? We want pounds. So I start with 1,200. 1,000 is in the denominator, so I divide by 1,000. 6 is in the numerator, so I multiply by 6. And then I multiply by 1.37. And that gives me an answer of roughly 9.864 pounds of CO2. All right, let's do one more of those. Typically, you complete 4 hours of laundry each week using the electric clothes dryer. How much CO2 is emitted during the year with the clothes dryer? Okay, so let's think what this is asking. We use 4 hours per week. We're talking about a year. Well, there are 52 weeks in 1 year. So if I use 4 hours each week, think this through, 4 hours each week for 52 weeks, 4 times 52 tells me that I'm going to use 208 hours. That's the total hours of my clothes dryer, okay? So now when I'm thinking through this, I look at my sheet and say, okay, the clothes dryer, if it's electric, uses a lot more, right? We can see a gas clothes dryer uses a lot less electricity. But alas, what we have is the electric version. So 3,400 watts, and then I'm going to do 1,000 watts is 1 kilowatt, because remember, we got to get out of kilowatts, or get out of watts and into kilowatts. Then we multiply by the number of hours. So times 208 hours, because we're talking about for the year. And once we are in kilowatt hours, then we can do 1.37 pounds over 1 kilowatt hour, because kilowatts cancels out with kilowatts, hours cancels out with hours, and now we're ready to roll. So 3,400 divided by 1,000 times 208 times 1.37. And that gives me 968.864 pounds of CO2. And that is kind of an introduction to carbon dioxide emissions with electricity.